If you thought the horror books that were published in the first half of the year were really good, then you're going to be excited. There are even more great horror books set to be published in the second half of the year. Hi, I'm Sarah and welcome to CoreMoodz. And today I want to share with you my most anticipated horror book releases of the second half of 2026. The second half of the year is bringing very unsettling, interesting books, and I've been making a list of the ones that I'm most curious about. There are a few that are impossible to ignore. The first book that I want to talk about is Accumulation by Amy Potwotka. This book has been released on the 5th of May, and it's about a woman that is beginning to physically and psychologically accumulate objects and possible memories that don't belong to her, leading her to uncover a disturbing connection between identity, grief, and obsession. I'm very intrigued by the concept. I'm a little bit worried because I feel like I've read a lot of books about horror and grief in the past years, but I think I'm okay with reading this book because it just seems very interesting. This book has been released on the 5th of May, and the title is I Know a Place and Other Dark Detours. It's by Nat Cassidy. I love Nat Cassidy, and I really wanted to read Rest Stop, but then I heard that he's gonna put Rest Stop into a collection with other stories, so I thought, let me just wait and read all the shorter stories together. On the 12th of May, we have Make Me Better by Sarah Gailey, and I've never read from Sarah Gailey, but a lot of her concepts and the way that she tackles stories, from what I've heard from people, seem very interesting, so I might make this the first book I pick up from her. It's about a character undergoes a radical transformation, medical, psychological, or both. It focuses on self-improvement and reveals darker truths about control, autonomy, and what it means to fix a person. I think it's very interesting, the whole beauty, cosmetic surgery, and horror. I think there's a very interesting trend that has been going on in the last few years where these two subject matters have been intersecting more and more. I'm very interested in this book. The next book is set to release on the 26th of May, and it's called I'll Watch Your Baby by Nina Veal. And it says that it's about a seemingly helpful babysitting arrangement spiraling into paranoia and danger as trust erodes and hidden motives emerge around the vulnerable child. Well, that seems like a very interesting and very scary situation. So I'm going to pick this book up immediately. The next book, also coming out on the 26th of May, is Bone of My Bone by Johanna van Veen. The cover of this book is what enticed me and what made me maybe want to read it. And then the synopsis says, set in a historical Gothic setting, the story follows a woman confronting family secrets, inheritance, and bodily horror tied to bloodlines and identity. The next horror book that I'm really anticipating is Sublimation by Isabel J. Kim. This book is expected to be published on the 2nd of June 2026. It says that it's a speculative collection examining how humans transform suffering and desire into something else, blending science fiction with emotional and philosophical questions. On the 30th of June, Paul Tremblay is coming out with a new book, Dead but Dreaming of Electric Sheep. And from the works that I've read from Paul Tremblay, he has a very unique way of telling the story that he wants to tell, a very interesting writing style, also the POVs and the information he tells you or doesn't tell you. He's an omitter. He likes to omit things and just make you fill in the gaps. He has like a very creative way he does things. A few of his books have not worked for me. I keep being interested in his books and attempting to read them when they come out because the few that hit really hit. From what I've heard, this book seems to be surreal, maybe meta horror, where the author plays with the reality. And there's this dream aspect that I'm fascinated with. Yeah, this is a book that I'm going to try to read before the end of the year. On the 7th of July, Chuck Tingle is coming out with a new book. If you told me years ago that Tingle would have been one of my favorite horror authors, I would have been shocked. But the books that he has written in the last few years, the horror books specifically, I've been really impressed with. So I'm really anticipating his new book, Fabulous Bodies. And it says that it's a genre-bending mix of horror and surrealism, exploring bodies, identity, and transformation. And it's going to be combining absurdity with deeply unsettling themes. And that's exactly what I want. I'm going to have to read this book as soon as it comes out. The next book coming out on the 11th of August is A Plagued Sea by Kim Bo-young. And Kim Bo-young is a South Korean author. She writes mostly sci-fi. I've read with the group her collection, her short story collection. I was very impressed. And I just think that even though some of the stories didn't work for me, I just appreciate her creativity. And she's very popular in South Korea. And a lot of people like her writing and like the way she tackles the concepts that she chooses to tackle. I think for me, the form didn't work. So that's why I was very excited when I heard that she's going to come out with a novella. And not just come out with a novella. She's gonna come out with a novella that's a crossover between sci-fi and horror. When I heard that, this book went top of my list immediately. And the synopsis says, in a world affected by a mysterious plague tied to the ocean, people struggle to survive and understand a spreading phenomenon that blurs science and myth. The next book is Our Cut of Salt by Dina Helm. This book is expected to come out on the 22nd of September of 2026. This author is a Palestinian American author, I think. I was intrigued by the synopsis of this book, and then when I found out their background, I was very interested and I immediately wanted to support them, especially because this horror story is set in Palestine. I'm very interested in horror stories that are set outside of the West, outside of the global North. To me, it's very interesting. I haven't read much horror stories coming out of West Asia. I was very interested, and the synopsis is a haunting story centered on community sacrifice and survival, where a group must confront a dark pact environmental force tied to the sea. So a few weeks ago, Tananarive Due announced that she was coming out with a new book. This book is going to be called Maisie Wood, and it's expected to come out on the 22nd of September. Tananarive Due is an author that I've read from before. I've read The Reformatory. I want to pick up The In Between, and also there is one more book, The Good House, that everyone loves. The Good House. It's a book that I have to pick up really soon. So this book, Maisie Wood, it's about a group of people entering a mysterious wooded area where reality warps, forcing them to confront generational trauma and supernatural forces. Very interesting concepts. I love survival horror. I love horror books set in the woods, somewhere isolated, somewhere where people have to confront their deepest, darkest fears. So those were the books that I had on my list, but there are a few books that have been announced, but I don't know much about them. For example, Andrew Joseph White is coming out with 2 books. One of them is called You're No Better, and the other one is called Beast Warden. Kylie Lee Baker is also coming out with a new book, Hell to Pay, I think. But I need to read Japanese Gothic first. So that's it for today. My TBR is mostly horror at the moment. So I have to read a lot of horror, which I love. So then I can make my TBR a little bit more reasonable. What books are you excited for in the second half of the year? It can be horror books specifically, or other books that are set to publish in the second half of the year. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and bye.